Alright, welcome back. We're on to the next assignment. So, you are to take a piece of watercolor paper and divide it into 3 sections. I would suggest even cutting them apart. And we're going to try 3 different watercolor techniques: glazing, wet on wet, and a flat wash. Alright, welcome back. We're on to the next assignment. So, you are to take a piece of watercolor paper and divide it into 3 sections. I would suggest even cutting them apart. And we're going to try 3 different watercolor techniques: glazing, wet on wet, and a flat wash. With your brush, you're going to load it with water and you're going to paint as if you have paint on your brush inside this area, and you need to work kind of quickly so that the water doesn't dry in certain areas and stay wet in others. So the whole area is now coated in water. Then you're going to pick your color and you're going to just kind of dab it into the wet watercolor paper, and it's going to start bleeding or crawling into that paper. And you want to quickly, while it's still wet, move the paint around, and it will only reach the borders of where the water was, but you have to kind of guide it there. So I have to make sure I finish doing this while the water is still wet on the paper. And then right before I kind of finish up, I just want to evaluate the situation, see if I notice any dark spots, and just try to keep the paint moving until it all kind of settles into one even coat. Sometimes it's pretty tricky to avoid a dark spot here or there, but do what you can to keep the paint moving around as it's drying to try to achieve that one even layer. So we'll take a look at this one again when it dries. Alright, the next one, wet on wet. Wet on wet is allowing the paint to bleed on purpose. This would be really good if you are trying to paint clouds, for example. You can make some nice fluffy clouds, or you can just create this kind of fuzzed out look if you want. So basically what you do is you paint with one color, but you're going to paint with another color on top of it and purposely let it bleed while this first color is still wet. So my first color, I have this kind of dark grayish blue. And then, just so you can see it better, I'm going to use a round brush instead. I'm going to grab another color and draw into the paint. And so you're going to kind of see it bleed into the paint. And it will probably look even different, more different, when this dries. But you can see the green paint's kind of crawling into the blue and having this very unpredictable path in the paint. So that can be kind of a nice quality if you want this very spontaneous look. The last one is called glazing. And this one involves dry layers on dry layers. So the first thing you need to do is create some sort of layer to dry. It could be kind of a flat, even area, or it could even just be a bunch of lines, for example, or patterns. So I'll kind of show you a glazing process in 2 different ways here. Kind of a solid area and some designs. Now that we've let this layer dry, for glazing we have to add a second layer. So basically glazing is just adding transparent layers on top of one another. So what happens is when you draw with a transparent layer on top of another transparent layer, it kind of creates a new color. So you'll notice I see one color of purple when it goes on top of the blue, but it looks very different when it's on top of just plain white paper. So you get this kind of second color that is achieved when you have colors overlap each other, which can be kind of nice. And then just to take a look back at everything else we worked on, the wet on wet has now dried and it has this very unpredictable look to it. And the flat wash is one very even pale coat of purple, just like we wanted it. So the flat wash creates a solid, transparent, even coat. Wet on wet creates this unpredictable crawling appearance of the paint. Glazing is layering dry layers on other dry layers to create new colors.